Okay, so the assignment is to, as accurately as you can, model a pair of pliers, or at least whatever your hinged object works out to be. In this case, obviously, a pair of pliers for me. So one of the things we're going to discuss tonight, and I just want to go over it with you real quick. In Fusion, as I said, we've so far worked with like joints, or we've started working with joints and threading tools and things like that, and obviously the more simple things, building from sketches and all that. But one of the main things I want to introduce tonight is working on bringing in additional components that you don't have to model, like specifically hardware. So in the insert section under the canvas, all that fun, scroll down and there's one that says insert McMaster-Carr component. This is a company online and really great from where we are here in the Boston area. There are a couple locations, one of which is just down in Pittsburgh. So if you needed parts, like specialty parts that you are modeling off of this, yeah, they'd be here like next day if they have it in stock. It's pretty great. So this is the exact same layout you get in the website if you opened it on any browser. But within here, I can say, hey, you know what, my project, I want to use certain screws. We'll say, all right, sure, socket head screws. Threading size, inch or metric. I'm going to go metric because the model we're working in is metric. You can choose your materials, size, blah, 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 blah. We'll say a standard size just for now. M6, standard pitch. Yeah, I don't know. Sure, a 10mm screw. I'm just going through a few things just to see. So you can use your standard selection feature, filters and all that such. Scroll down, blah, 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 blah. And who wants to use anything other than stainless steel because it's shiny and it holds up well. So what you would do, once you finally find that which one you really, really want to use here, find your part, highlight it, and here there's two separate ones. Just double check. One says stainless, one says still stainless, but it's got a black oxide coating. Don't need to know all that stuff specifically, just more of that. There are two options here. And unfortunately, the floating window is not as big as it should be, but go over to the hot link or the actual link that is the part number. And when you click here, you'll see it brings up a tool thing. And this is where you'd order how much you want. You know, like, hey, yeah, $8 for a pack of 50 sure beats a standard hardware thing. But at the bottom here, you'll see product detail. Sometimes you actually have to click product detail. But in this case, we're going to use not SolidWorks. Scroll down. We're going to use Step. There's other formats. They all work fine. PDF, not so much. Set. SolidWorks would be a direct word for actual SolidWorks program. We're going to use the last one, Step. Select there. Press download. And blurb. There you go. Now you don't have to go about like modeling hardware itself. If you want to make custom hardware, more power to you. Some components would actually be machined with threads and such, but if you're just doing fastening hardware, there you go. In this case, it would come into the model just like if you're bringing in a canvas, and then you can orient it however you need. If you wanted to have this like oriented to the side, sure, great. We'll do 90 degrees. If you need to rotate it, whatever. Wanted that -90, so it's right in front of my face. It'll come in as a new object. You have your standard options here. If you want to have it lock in place right there, sure. Capture position, great. Click OK. Now that is a full modeled component, not a mesh. This is a solid. So if you wanted to play with this model and actually modify it, make it your own or something, more power to you. But now this is a direct solid model within your project. And it comes in as a separate component, so you can snap it to locations with a joint tool. You can manually bring it in place too, but if you just wanted to plop it in somewhere, there you go. So that's a really effective way of, well, one, not having to model everything, but also being able to just drop in parts that you can actually order if you needed to. All right, so super good there. We'll swing back to that as we get to the rest of the actual project. Oh, nah, don't want to save. There we go. Okay. So the one we're going to use tonight is, I'm going to model a pair of pliers. So where do you start? Well, exactly. Where do you start with anything? Now you're trying to model something that's more complex. It's not quite as standard. again, I like to use just a bounding box. I just like to create a sketch that's as big as my largest dimensions. So it just kind of plops thing in place, in place for me. So I don't have to really deal with, or at least gives me a frame of reference. That's what it really comes down to. So first things first, though, don't forget, save your project. That way you don't accidentally forget what you're doing. Let me do some phones there. There we go. All right, and we'll do example Pliers. Okay, so first thing, actually give me a rough dimension. So front to back, it is just about smack on 21 centimeters, which is 210 millimeters. All right, so let me start a sketch. Flip floppity flip right down onto the bottom. I'll start with a center point rectangle. Loop, tab over, 210 by, what is the largest section here? Oops, wrong way. Roughly 55. Cool. Okay. Now, I'm going to start that as a construction line. I should have started that way. Press X after highlighting. Great. Now, before I move on, I do want to throw down some other general reference points just to help myself out in the later model. One of those is going to be, now my sketch, my rectangle here is centered exactly that, in the center. It is not centered around like the joint or anything. So I'm going to just place some points to help myself out later. So right there, about in the center is, yeah, right on about 50 millimeters. Again, good part about using imported tools, they're probably made with metric sizes. So hey, metric rule works well. All right, so I'm gonna start, and I'm gonna work from right to left because brain. Now, I didn't actually measure where that is gonna be placed. I am gonna measure, however, how big is that inner circle there? That looks to be about 12 millimeters. Yeah. So I'm going to just cite that as 12. Okay. But like I said, that circle is actually, what did I say, 50? It actually looks like it's actually about closer to 48. Cool. Okay. So how you can put in like reference dimensions is in your sketch dimension. Great. This is what you'd usually use for like replacing sketches or replacing dimension, things like that. You can also use your sketch dimension to actually locate stuff within your drawing. So let me pull down to here. All right, so using the dimension tool here, sketch dimension, click there or just press D. If I click in the center of the circle that I just drew, and then to the side here, you see a little reference line comes up. Click there. This is how I can actually put things in place by dimensions rather than having to like measure things out and put lines and all that stuff first. So that was 48 millimeters from roughly to the center to the end of my pliers. So type in 48. That snaps that over into place. Super easy to work with that way, just to give yourself some reference points. So I'm going to turn that into a construction line as well. So I'm going to highlight the circle, press X. There we go. Okay. Those are my rough things I'm going to work with. I just wanted a general size, and then where is the center of my pair of pliers. From there, I'm going to start a new sketch. So finish this one. Go ahead and label. Pliers reference works for me. Great. Okay, now let's start working on the rest of this stuff. So like I said, one of the things you want to do is, well, not going to worry about trying to model the whole thing. I'm going to model half of this, and then I'm going to use the mirror tool to flip it. There's no reason to make this harder for yourself. So let's start sketching this all out. Now, yes, you could build this with like a selection of, you could start with this with a selection of other parts, randoms there. 1 second. All right. So I got my center point, got my general reference size. Great. So let's start measuring this stuff out. You can use calipers if you want. You can use measuring points. Great. Something like this, I like to start with that central location. I like to start with that center hinge. Use my calipers, measure out the round thingy. That is measuring out to, we'll call that 24 millimeters. Great. All right. So let's start the sketch on the bottom. Center circle, right smack in the middle of there. That was 24. Great. So that's the outside. How large is that inside? Well, I already measured that, but we'll do it again. It's hard to see that. That was 12, 14. What did I say? I don't remember. No, there. It was 12. Great. Okay. So one of the things, how do you start defining any of this? How do you start defining these pliers, this wedge, all of this crap? Well, just start drawing. Start it really basically with anything. Start from a point. For one, I know that the pliers don't stop at that circle. They're actually a little bit larger. So from the outside there, that is 26.8, probably more like 27 millimeters. All right. So from there, I'm going to start a center point rectangle. I am going to do this as a construction, but I know I want that top, that to be, what did I say, 27? Yeah, 27 wide. And then I'm just going to snap this to the side over there. Great. Now for right now, that sketch underneath is kind of starting to get a little visually confusing. So I'm just going to hide that for the moment. I already got my center point, and right now I'm working on this stuff. All right. So that's how tall that's going to be. Great. And we're going to, because I'm going to cut these notches and such in a moment. But for now, let's go ahead and work on the rest. So from here, I'm going to start just a line from, looks like the edge. So let me zoom in. I'm going to start actually making half of the pliers here. So I'm going to bring cursor to the center and just start a line going straight to the end here. Great. Center is selected. How tall is one of these spots here? That is about 3.4. All right. So now is when you got to decide which side am I building. Really doesn't matter. So we'll say we're going to build this upper one. So moving from there. All right. That is 3.4. I can type in 3.4 and then I just set my angle. Great. Now this is sometimes the tricky stuff. Well, okay, well, how do I figure out where that point is? There's definitely a wedge there or something. Now, if you had a protractor so you could easily figure out that angle, and I don't have one right now. So instead, what I'm going to do is kind of draw an imaginary line to where that point is, or look down, or if you have something that's a little more pointed, you can still work with it that way, and kind of just figure out where in the center that is, which really it's about in the center of the plier cutter there. So let's measure to that, roughly in the center, blah, blah, blah. That looks to be about, I don't know, 27, 28, sure. All right. So this would be where I could draw a line to, right in the center. I think it might be easier to just draw backwards, meaning I'm going to start a construction line, draw back 28 millimeters, and put it right there. So now I just have a point right there. Now I could have probably done this with the dimension tool, but I just drew a line there. I can always delete it later, but for now, we're going to do that. Still on construction line. I'm going to go from that point up to the top. There we go. Now I can go back and delete. If you have multiple overlapping lines, remember you can delete them by first mousing over and then holding down the selection key. So left click. Now it brings up this little checkbox. Now I can mouse over which one it is and select that one. Now I can delete it. Really, it's just an easier way to work sometimes on that. All right. Get out of construction lines, straight line. There we go. Just so I can make that little notch there. Now I'm going to draw straight back. Makes it easy enough. I'm going to draw to the center there for now, or looks like I should just might as well go ahead and draw backwards a bit. I'm just going to pick a spot. Doesn't matter at the moment because I'm going to figure out how to cut that up here in a bit. All right. So I got that part. Now I need to really decide some of these other areas. Now, I'm not going to bother with the notches just yet. Right now, I'm just trying to focus on getting this thing actually modeled out. So we can build out the notch here later. We can build out the teeth later. These are details. I'm trying to get the major parts here. All right. So the next thing is I want to make this notch. And the reason this notch even exists is because when you open and close, if this didn't have the notch there, or rather you'd have to have the pliers smaller, but if the notch weren't there, the pliers wouldn't be able to open as much. You see how it opens and closes there. All right, so that means I need to figure out how to do that. And honestly, this would be the kind of thing, again, yeah, you could figure out angles and all that such, or you could cheat and just say, all right, let me measure the size there. That looks about 10 millimeters. Cool. So the size there is 10. Let's draw a construction line from the center here, straight up, super duper. And if half of 10 is 5, repeat a construction line. Right over, and I want that to be 5. Great. Same, I want that one to be 10. Great. Now, from my center, oops, that wasn't supposed to be a construction line. So now for my center, I can just draw over to those points. Keep that line. Bam. So now, when I zoom out and I mouse over that profile, now you can see I'm easily building out that section there. So yes, again, if you have specific measuring tools, of course you can make more accurate measurements, but we're also working with what we have. We have okay-ish calipers and we have decent rulers. That's what we're going to work with. All right. And obviously there's some trimming work to be done here in a bit. That's all right. But now, since I know I've got to that point, how far is that little notch there? Looks like it's about, now one thing on here, if you note, it is a little flat. So it actually comes to, you've got a nice, like what would probably be done with a fillet or an over round fillet there. But here you got this little point. So I'm going to measure to that. And let's call that 10 millimeters again. Okay. From there over 10. Match up. Great. Now this is going to start getting confusing in here. So I do want to, again, select and hold. And I want to get rid of some lines here just because this is getting a little busy. Select that one and let's delete that one. That's fine. This is an construction line. That's okay. That one works. That can stay. I'll rebuild this line here. Great. I was just throwing a line in again real quick. Okay, cool. All right. Now, again, how do I kind of build this handle? One thing to remember, though, I just motioned to this handle, but I'm building the top plier. Don't forget, they cross. So if you're building scissors or anything like that, remember if you're making like the let's put it left and right then instead of top and bottom. If you're building the left one, make sure you build the right handle. The parts cross. So double check that. All right, easy way to start on something that is much more organic rather than like something with hard lines I can really measure. Well, again, let's first establish how far apart are these. That looks to be about 20 millimeters apart. Great. So that means that my handle should start 10 millimeters from my center line. So now I'm going to unhide the first sketch. And let's do another construction line. Remember, I'm going down. So 10 millimeters down. Snap to there. Great, got a point. Okay. That all starts to come out. And this is where I already realized I messed up. I modeled the top half of that part. That should have been down in the bottom. But that is a pretty easy fix. What I can come in here is just extend or replace this line here. So I'm select there. another line, just make sure it goes through. And anytime you're getting close to something, or better yet, I realize this is a construction line, I'll change it afterwards. If I'm trying to get that to run as an extension of an existing line, you can see as I move around here, it does want to snap too, but just to ensure that it does, if you mouse over that center point, a shared point, and then mount and then continue downward, it tends to want to snap into that location much more readily. Or of course, if you snap to there and just take note that it is, in fact, 110.3 degrees, well, that makes it easy. Lock that in. Oops. Delete one of those. I have to do this. There we go. And then just snap down. There we are. So this is just, well, first fixing what I messed up there. All right, there we go. And I can start to mirror some of this stuff later when I go to work on this. That's fine. Okay. So now I've got what will be, getting confused on which way I'm turning here. All right. So I've got a starting point from the top here. That's going to work downward. I've got to model this out, and it's got to come to here. All right. So this is definitely some of those areas where, yeah, you're going to kind of have to fudge some of the details a little bit, because it's really difficult to get this, something like this, exactly accurate with the tools we have. So main thing is you're trying to get the details you can accurate. The rest, yeah, get it to work. All right. So this would be where we'd start a fit point spline right after I build the base on here too. So I'm going to continue that line out from the back. From that center hub, that's about 15 millimeters. Snap that right to there. Great. I think that actually did a construction line again. There we are. Okay, so I needed it to sweep upwards and then down. Now, you can get a pretty decent estimate of these measurements here by just figuring, all right, well, I know that from there, I know that from the back of the pliers to here is 140. So let's say right about there, which is 60 from the back. And obviously that would be 80 from the front. Had the math right real quick. So right about there, how wide is that? It's definitely beneficial if you actually put a couple of little marks if you can. So great, that's what I'm actually trying to measure to. And in between there, yeah, it's about 30 millimeters. Great. So construction line from the back to 60. And then again, what did I just say? That's 30, so 15. There we go. So just draw, so you start drawing some of this stuff out just to give yourself some reference points. Okay, so now I have a couple of reference points. Now I can really start to sketch this out. So select fit point spline. I start from the back here, which is here at the back of the pliers. I'm going to draw up to that point. I'm going to draw down to that point. I can adjust these. And again, this part is where it's going to be not as exact, but it's going to be pretty darn close. So there we are. Great. That's pretty good to where I want it to be. Now the end is going to end up square. And that's fine. I'm going to fix that later. But that'll work. Okay, great. Now I can decide, well, how thick is this? Yes, with the handle on there, that's all right. That handle, it looks to be about 12.5. Okay, now I can use the offset tool. I don't necessarily want that other part, but I can trim it off afterwards. That is negative 12.5 because I'm going the other direction. Matches up pretty well to the end of my box that I drew out. Yeah, that works. Good. Okay. Now I can complete this line over here. straight line from the back, straight over to where it intersects with my offset line. There we are, hit enter. Now I can trim off those little bits. Yes, I'm gonna get a warning. Yes, you messed with the constraints, blah, 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 blah. All right. And then back here, this is where I could probably pretty easily create a circle. So what I'm gonna, or create a circled end and then modify that or so. So how to do that? Well, how do you draw between two ends? All right, well, we did that before, but I want it to stop at the end of this box. So what I'm gonna use is under circle, a 3-point circle. So this is where I can, instead of starting at these points or anything, why is it? It keeps stopping. There we are. I'm not sure what's going on here. Cursor keeps stopping. All right. Hold on a moment here. When in doubt, save. Just hit escape. All right. Let's try that again. Not sure why it was doing that, but maybe I had too much data going. Still doing it. That is super weird. All right. Well, let's try something. Often in doubt, stuff keeps doing just what you know perfectly well it's not supposed to be doing that. Pause. Okay, so tried saving and restarting. Let's see where that gets us. So try this once more. Circle, 3-point circle. Hey, it's actually working. All right. So what I'm trying to do is find a point between these points here. Now, if you can't find something, that's all right. So what I'm going to do is, before I make the 3-point circle, start a line, press X for a construction line, just draw between these 2 points here. Just let the snap do what it wants to, or what it needs to. Now I have a line here in the center, or line between these 2 points. So now when I go to create a 3-point circle, starting here, it's going to be able to find my center point between there. So that's all. Then I can draw out from there, find a point there, and I'll find a point here. So I'm just going to try to make these match. There we are. All right, that didn't work as well. So Control Z. Other option would be trying out the tangent circles. These basically do the same thing, only they work on tangents. So let's try this. Draw a circle from here, circle to there. Come on, catch up. That's not wanting to let me do it at all. Fine. Then the last step is measure this. All right, how wide is this? Oops. That should be 12.1, I believe, but let me double check again. I don't recall. 12.8. All right. So what I'm going to do then, I'm going to create a circle somewhere in the middle, but that needs to be 12.8. Now what I can do is use my constraints to snap this in place. So first I'm going to use the tangent constraint. There to there. That's going to snap the circle over there. Use other constraint there to there. To my fit point spline. It's not selecting it. Not sure why. Right. Okay, now it's not doing that. Fine. You know what last ditch is? We delete that. I will close my sketch, change that construction line to a regular line, and instead then we'll just use, nope, not offset, the fillet tool. There we go. That makes it work. So we know that is 12.8, so let's say 12, so let's make that a 6. All right. Again, repeat fillet there to there. Oops. Because it has this little tail, make sure you chop off the little tail. There we go. Now fill it there to there. Same, 6. Pretty darn close. There you go. So, a couple of tools you tried, they don't work, or they're not working right. Try something else. Okay. Now I have a handle, and I have the head of my pliers. All right. Now, I know all these dimensions are pretty confusing, but let's work with what we got. Finish sketch. I'm going to hide the first one. We'll just do pliers, side A. Okay. Now we get into extrusions and such, our old friend. All right, so how thick is this whole thing? That is 12 millimeters thick. Great. So what we need to do, extrude. Now one thing here, take special note, these pliers, the internal pin is actually part of one of the sides. The other thing is, look between the sides here. The center here isn't a full extrusion. It actually only goes to half. So while the pliers themselves are a full 12 millimeters thick, this center hub here is actually only 6, but it's 6 on either side, and it's 6 on opposing sides. So the easiest way to do this would be to do multiple extrusions and then join them together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude one side of the head, one side of the handle, and then I'll extrude the center here. So I'm going to select the handle and the head first. Now, just to make things easier, I want to keep everything right on the XY plane here. So it'll be split. Well, if I extruded this to 12, it's all going to go up one side. And that's just going to be more difficult for me. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose direction on the toolbox into symmetric. And you have 2 options here. Now of course, right now, the default is it's doing symmetric on both sides. I want that to be the whole length. So you got 2 options. If this were leaving it on half length, you'd press 6, and that way it's going 6 in one direction, 6 in the other. Or you choose the other measurement selection, whole, and I can put in 12 millimeters for the actual overall, and it'll be 6 on either side. Just a couple of simple, easy ways to work. Okay, great. And operation, I'm going to immediately drop this into a new component. Okay. Great. Now all my center stuff is gone, all my sketches are gone, but I still need that center. All right. Let me open up side A. I'm going to label this piece plier side A. Nope, not exclamation point. I want A. All right. So now, and I'm just going to shift my view so that it's by color instead of appearance. Shift in. Now I'll go back and extrude again. Which side is this? It has the half on the top. All right. So I'm going to go in, select that center ring. You got to have to pick a few parts here. There we go. And I can either just press in 6, it'll go up to the top, or I could select again, extent type to object, and just select the top of one of these, and it'll snap to that too. Same deal. Now I'm going to leave this internal piece hollow, just because I want to actually drop in a screw here, for example. But there we are. We got to that part. Great. I'm going to let this join. There we are. Hide the sketch. Now I have 1/2. Now again, this still needs a lot of development work, but we're getting there. Now, what I could do is go back, sketch, yada, yada, yada. Because a couple of problems is going to be, if I try to mirror this directly, I'm going to end up with something I don't want. I'll show you what I mean here. If I select this whole thing, and then mirror plane, I'll just use the mirror there. It mirrors it directly. So I still end up with a void underneath. That's no good. So what instead I can do is I got two options. I can mirror the sketch itself, which can get kind of problematic, but plenty useful. Or, because effectively this isn't a mirror, this is the same part rotated. And this is why I haven't made any of the details and such into the pliers yet. Just realized that that cable was in the way. Instead of mirroring, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the whole thing. I'm going to select move. But what I do here, I want to actually say create copy. Select that box. Now I'm just going to take that part and rotate it 180 degrees. Now that didn't drop it into the exact place. I should have used the center point over here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cancel this. Again, move. Whole thing. I want to set my pivot though, right smack in the middle here. But I actually want it in the middle of down here. So just like using the joint command, if you have difficulty selecting your point, if it's in like the middle of a floating spot, now there is a little X and it will snap over there if you're careful, but sometimes it's difficult. If you mouse over a plane around like a hole or something, press and hold Control, it locks into that plane and it's a lot easier to snap it in place. Let's see here. There we go. Pivot is set, uncheck. Go back to, oh, not front, right. And now rotate, oops, I forgot to do the, go ahead. I forgot to hit the create copy. Do it again. Come on, snap in there. There we go. Okay, now we got it. So I set my center point, my pivot point right to the middle, uncheck, create copy is good. Type in 180 because it's just easier than trying to find it. That's what we want. So instead of the mirror and having to make duplicate sketches and all of that, now I can just rotate it around. Click OK. Now it did drop that into the original body here. So what I want to do is from there, I'm going to throw that out as a new component from that object, from the body. Click OK. So it's just as a separate component entirely. Oops. Label stuff. Label it and it'll make it so much easier. Okay. Those are the basic parts there. Now what we want to do, we can add details, all of that such. Easy stuff on here. Let's play around with like the fillet tool, see if it'll give me a full round. I'm not sure if it'll let me. Let's try over here. That's got all the way around. Great. And we'll just shrink that, see where it brings me to. Looks like about 5 is the magic number there. Now, something like this would have been a lot easier to do, and I can still do this by going back in my history slider and adjusting this. So rather than me doing the detail work, like adding the rounded end for the plier here, this is what I do want. But what I'm going to do instead, cancel, move the history slider back to here before I made the copy and everything. Fillet tool, all the way, it is all the way around. Great. That was about 5. Great. Hit OK. Now, when I go back to current, it's done the same thing to the copied part. So this is what I was talking about as far as, yes, complex modeling gets exactly that, complex, but don't feel like you have to know everything right off the bat, right off the start point. you can always go back in history and add details. Hooray for time travel, at least virtual time travel. You can always go back and make corrections, make changes. And if you have made things as copies or as duplicates, I know that's the same thing as copy, whatever, that way you don't have to keep remodeling the same parts over and over or making the same changes over and over. You can alter the original and just have that be carried forward. Great. So for time's sake, let's say we're going to keep working with those details in a bit, but for now, save here, and let's put a detail on this that is with the copied side. So just so y'all know, if you haven't seen it before, adding that detail in when I open up and drop down my my iterations, that just gives you little notes underneath. So before, when it was just item created, great. I didn't make any changes to that little box that popped up. As we're getting more complex, it might help you to write notes down. So when you actually go and actively save, you can type in just a little note to yourself and change that in there, and it just gives you a reference point. So if you're making multiple iterations, it's convenient right there. All right, so we got that. So what I want to do now is let's connect these two with a joint. So remember, the detail is these have to be separate components. So if you have parts like in a body within the original drop-down component, just select it from the body drop-down, go to new component, and it'll kick it out as a separate component entirely. All right. Default tool of row symbol, joint, or just press J. There's more complex parts, but we're using this one for now. All right. So the trick is you have your position again, just like with the vessel, and you have the motion you want. Well, this one, I want to go ahead and pre-select revolute. That's the one that revolves around. Now, position, I am not selecting on the top or in the middle here. I'm selecting way down in the middle itself between these two parts. So on the model or on the object, I'm trying to get the joint between here and also in the middle, which obviously on this example, there's a solid part there. So what that means is a lot of times it's a lot easier to hide an object or a body and then select. Remember that in your selection component or your component selection toolbox here, the first one you select is what will move. The second you select is where it will move to. So if I want one side to stay put and the other one to move, the first one I select is the one that will actually move. The other one will stay put. So I'm just going to go with an A-B thing. Now hide the first one or the second one. I need my selection actually down underneath. So I'm going to orbit under. And as I mouse over into that hole, it'll pop. My selection cursor will pop up, but it keeps kind of falling away. Now it's snapping in place there now. But like I said, if you're having trouble selecting, mouse over a shared plane object, so like this ring, press and hold Control. That locks the cursor to selecting things on that plane. Now I can snap over there. Boop. The first object ghosts out. Unhide the second. Do the same. Only on this one, I'm selecting it from the top. Might help, especially when you already have things that are shared like this in like a tightly shared space. Might help to just hide the first one entirely. Again, snapping to right there. If you can snap to it, great. If not, mouse over the shared plane, press and hold Control, over, snap, unhide. Woo! It goes nanners. Great. That's pretty much what I want for now, and I will put in the details in a moment. Press OK. New thing pops up on your hierarchy tree, joints. If I mouse over the revolve, you have to the side, edit joint limits. This is where you can put in your actual limits. Let me zoom out a little bit. You'll see these little flags pop up. This is how you can manually do it. Click and drag one of those flags. But first, you have to actually activate the minimum and maximum. One is the minimum. The one that is highlighted is your 0. The one that is not is the maximum. Let me grab that one, and I'm going to move it out. You can move it out manually to where it gets close to those pinch points. There you go. And to test, hit animate.
Can I still screwdriver?
There you go. Got from there. And now you see it's moving about. Hit OK. Now it's going to snap to. That's fine. But one of the things you want to keep in mind, just like with the other project, if I were to grab one of these, and you should be able to grab and move this on its own. Problem is, if I drag it, click and drag, it's moving the whole thing. Definitely not what I want. So let me Control Z the position there. You want to ground one of the objects. So which one did I actually want to have move? Try the animate. Well, it's already doing that to the pink one, side A. So I want to ground side B. To do that, right click on the component and the second option there, ground. You'll see that pops up on your history slider. The little pin pops up on the cursor or on the component. What that does is that virtually locks that object, that component in place, period, end of sentence. That will not move whatsoever unless you unground it, which is just right click and then there you go. All right, so once that is grounded, now it can't move and you're all set. Now this other part, you can click and drag and it will move within the constraints you set. Remember that if you open or close or whatever and leave it not in the original position, a new prompt will come up in the top right-hand bar of the main toolbar. It will ask you if you want to capture the new position or revert to the original position. Instead of pressing Control Z or Command Z, you can just hit either revert and it'll snap back, or if you say, hey, you're now rotating things in position and you want it to look this way for the display of the model, you can capture the position, meaning it just leaves it in that spot now. But I'm going to revert back. There you go. Okay, I'm going to save again. Now that is the joint added. Just that way, if you're going back through this model, you can see more easily. Okay, got those parts in. Again, I'm going to add the other details and such later, but first I'm going to finish adding parts. Now, yes, in my original model, this actually has a solid pin in place. I could just extrude a circle into there and done and done. But for this project, we are adding hardware. So I'm going to take a measurement just that way I can work with it. All right, let's see here. That was, again, 12 millimeters. Great. So what I want to do is now I want to drop in a new part, new component from McMaster-Carr extension. So I'm going to go to Insert McMaster-Carr Components. Let it boot up. And you are welcome to drop whatever you please into this. If you find something that, hey, holy crap, they make a platinum coated screw, I want that one. Go for it. You're not, I mean, if you want to buy it, more power to you. I mean, that'd actually be kind of cool. But anyway, in this case, I want to add in a screw and I will put in a nut. If you want, what you can do is actually thread one of the insides, more power to you. But for reference, I'm going to select a screw. Let's see what kind of fancy screws they have. We'll just stick with a rounded head screw. Nice. Metric. And to select your size, that hole was a 12 millimeter size. So I need an M12 screw. That's why metric is just easier. The thread, that means there's only one size thread, yada, yada, but I do need a length. I need this to stick, the screw to stick out further on one side so I can put a nut on the other side. This thing is 12 millimeters wide, and it shows me what my dimension is here. It measures from the bottom of the cap to the end of the screw. All right, so yes, I should have measured the bolt or the nut first, but we'll just estimate. So that's 12, let's say 18. I don't know, we'll figure it out in a minute. All right, there we go. It shows me, it already opens up the little dialog box here. Drop down, you want to use the step file. Do not select when it says no threads, because that's just for simplifying a model. We want the full model threads. So select the step, 3D.step, download, and black. it drops it right in. Now, for what we're doing here, because remember, we're putting this in position with a joint, I can move this just out of the way and lock that in position. Like it said before, or when I move something, that prompt comes up for capture position. You can do that within this box here. Select capture position, press OK. All right, button head screw, showing it's a different component entirely. It's a different color, and it's a new component on my hierarchy tree. I also want to grab a nut for this. So let's go back, open this back up. Nuts, metric, same, M12, and I think that, oh, I forgot that was a 1 millimeter. Thank you much. 1.75. Appreciate you remembering that. And go nuts. You want a press fit? You want a square nut? Whatever. Just to keep it simple, we'll go with a regular, boring lock nut. But make it a little bit easier on myself. Let's say, ooh, titanium. Hey, titanium nut. Why not? There we go. Already giving you an example. It will remember your selection, so you don't have to select that drop down every time. Download. Huzzah. Move that out. Now, is that too big? Oh my God, yes, that's enormous. But we'll deal with that later. Capture position. Okay. All right, those are now in place. So now let's put these in place with a joint. So I remember what this does. Let's animate just to remind myself. Okay. So just for grins, what I'm going to do, or rather just to make it a little bit easier on myself. Now, we're not worried about these two threads meshing together or anything. What I'm going to do is just use a joint command, a rigid joint, and just plop these in place. It's more of the important part is getting your actual hinge of whatever, if there's pliers, if it's box, whatever, getting that in position properly. These we can just drop into place properly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference the different components of the plier, the different sides, with the nut and bolt, meaning that I'm going to put the nut and lock that to the moving side of the pliers, and I'm going to use the, or I'm sorry, I got that backwards. The bolt locked to the moving part of the pliers, and the nut to the non-moving side. So let me show you what I mean. So first, let's do the nut here. So again, select joint, component. I want to select what's going to move first, and then to where it will move. So I'm going to mouse over, and this is where sometimes it gets difficult. It's trying to select like the threads, yada, yada, yada. This is why I was saying use the hold control command. Float over the flat spot, press and hold control. Now it's not going to try and select those threads. Now it just snaps right in the middle. Great. That goes out, tumble under, and I want this to snap right in the middle over here. Press and hold control, locks there. Whoop, just dropped it in there. Yes, sound effects are necessary. I want to lock this in place. I don't want that to rotate. I mean, if you want to play around with it, that's fine, but I'm just going to use a rigid joint for this. What that does, and you see the whole thing shakes, that is showing you that that is basically like glued to the parts. They're not joined like with the actual join command. They're still two separate components. And yeah, the shaking kind of gets a little anxiety. But they are basically like they're glued together. So that's a really easy way to work with that. Click OK. Please stop shaking. That's freaking me out a little bit. Okay. Now this one gets a little more difficult. I'm going to use another joint command. My motion is still rigid. I want this to snap to the top up here, but the problem is I have to select basically inside the bolt, because let me tumble under. I want this bolt to sit flush on the top of my pliers. And I can't select in there, and it's literally inside. It's not in the middle of a open space. It's literally, my point is within the body of this component. But using the same thing, float my cursor under the head of the bolt here, press and hold control, and you can see the X is right in the center, it allows me to snap in there and actually select that. Now, tumble back up to the top. You can get out the X, or at least it shows, then you try to mouse over and it disappears. So this is why I keep saying use the press and hold control. Makes it a little bit easier. And it just snaps it in place. Motion again, that is now rigid to that part. Click OK. Great. Zoom back out. Now, if I just go back out to the animate again, correct, the nut and bolt are not moving, but that's all right. I'm not really registering them to anything. I just wanted you to be able to go through and see how to connect these parts together. Select OK, and there we go. Let me go ahead and save. I'll just say hardware joints. There we are. Okay. So at this point, this is where you'd start adding in the rest of your details, or you could have done the details beforehand. Just wanted to skip over them for time's sake. So I still do need to model in like the cutter here and the ridges and such like that. Things like the ridges, those would be best done actually within the original sketch. So just for reference for that, I'm going to show you how to do that real quick. Let me roll back history slider. Oh my God, got nothing left. Back into the sketch here. And this would be a part where I could add it in separately afterwards, but honestly, this would be a really easy way to do it because it's just going to carry over. So these are covering about 10 millimeters worth. So go back into this sketch, and I'm just going to add a couple of triangles. Best thing is something like this. I would just do basic triangle. From there, I'm going to use the rectangular pattern. I don't want to have to keep redrawing those objects. I want those two. Direction, going that way. And how many of these? I don't know. They're tiny. Let's say 10. And I'm just going to spread these out so that they match up. Again, anytime you can let the program do the work for you, that's what it's there for. Just going in one direction using the command. Okay. Now you might have to tweak your sketch after the fact, but let's see what happens. Go back to current. Oh, sorry. Finish sketch, then go back to current. Going to recalculate a bunch of stuff. All right. So what I needed to do is go back into the original extrude, edit that feature, and just make sure to deselect the little spots inside. Or better yet, what am I doing? Those two sides, easy. Whoop, whoop. Same deal, no change other than now those sketches are, or those little triangles are built into the sketch. And I can do that the same thing for the triangles in the back, but you get the idea. Okay. Now, one problem is I messed that up when I said new body, or no, it didn't. Never mind. I still did. I forgot that I put it into a different part there. Great. There we go. Model is still complete. Only now it also has those little plier ridges into them. There's still plenty more to do, but I will continue modeling that later. So you've got the joints, your main revolve, which actually moves the whole plier around. Let me hide those sketches. Great. I have my hardware installed. You can select whatever you please, of course. And those are snapped to their relative sides. It's about as close as I can make it with the tools we're using. And I've got some features already put in, like rounded handle, the little teeth. I still have more to add, but I'll add those after the fact. Now, just a quick reference point. Looking into the center here, look how this Oh, looks like there's a difference in the fillet. Interesting. Let me change the view and it'll be a little more obvious. We'll just do with shaded, or maybe shaded with visible edges only. Strangely, it did two different things. So I'll have to go back in the sketch and see why it did that. I'm not sure why. But what I was going to say is where I added these teeth into the original sketch, I want in my model here, these teeth actually go into that fillet. So it would actually be better to add these teeth with a sketch after model is, or the fillet is added and everything, and use an extrude cut command to slice those out. And you might have to do that on both sides, but it would just be easier to do it that way. Just a point that occurs to me as I'm modeling. So there you go. That's pretty much what we're aiming for. This is one of the options. You could do something with like handles and such, or next class, we're going to do an example of a lidded box that has a recess that would fit something like this. Or I think I'll make a box for the caliper. So good luck with it. Let me know where I can help.